Spawn, Issue 13, Flashback Part 2, published in 1994. Dedicated to George Perez. Story and art, Todd McFarlane. Editor and letters, Tom Orzechowski. Color, Steve Oliff, Reuben, and Olyoptics. Welcome back to Cosmic Comics. This issue begins with a wall of text and a necrometer reading 7926. Al is remembering playing baseball sometime after he and Wanda met. During the game, Al was running for home and broke his ankle running into the catcher. This was the last time Al played baseball. Other than fight and kill, baseball was the only thing Al did well. This is one of those times where we see the interest of the artist showing up in their work. Nothing wrong with that. Todd is known to be a huge baseball fan. Al doesn't remember if they won the game, but he remembers the night of passion he shared with Wanda while she pampered him through the pain. Al is using stories like this to remind himself of what he lost, and to help build up his inner rage and hate. He assumes the angrier he is, the less he'll have to rely upon his powers. Al can feel his power draining as he uses it, and correctly gauges that he spent about 20% of his power. Moving forward, he wants to rely on himself instead of his powers as much as possible. This is the second time we've heard this speech from Al. Al is ready to confront the scumbag who stole his life. We turn the page and see that all the zings and pops are coming from Badrock playing a video game. He needs to kill one last guy before getting to level 6. The text crawl along the right side of the page has nothing to do with what's going on visually. Al is reflecting on Chapel. They used to be friends until the two of them became too much alike. Chapel went on a bit of a glory streak in an attempt to get recruited into Youngblood. The two things Al and Chapel could always talk about over a beer were death and women. Al used to call Chapel the Don Juan of killers because he always had one or two ladies hanging off of him. For those who don't know, Don Juan is known in classical European literature as the greatest lover the world has ever known. Chapel never entered into a relationship, just a steady string of new women. He would even joke about taking Wanda off Al's hands once a week, or maybe he wasn't joking? Badrock breaks his controller before making it to level 6. For some reason, the controller breaking puts the entire computer screen on the fritz. Badrock complains that nobody seems capable of designing a controller that can stand up to his stumpy fingers. Before Chapel joined up with Youngblood, Chapel brought Al with him for an initial tour of the Youngblood Washington, D.C. Central Headquarters. Youngblood allowed Al to join Chapel for the tour so they could schmooze Al as a potential team member. During that visit, Al learns the layout of the place, and now that he's returned, not much has changed in the 5 years that have passed. Al's body doesn't trip the heat sensors on the way in. He makes his way in via a supply shipping container. After infiltrating Youngblood's headquarters, Al has to wait days, perhaps weeks, or possibly months for Chapel to return, although I don't think it's that long. Sitting in the darkness day after day, Al finds his hatred softening. It's then that he starts to remember Wanda and all that they had in order to fuel his rage once more. Badrock continues complaining about the controller when Shaft calls him over to the computer. He's checking in to make sure Badrock isn't using their security screen to play video games. Badrock lies about playing video games and claims he has his eyes peeled. We get that classic drifting red hellspawn cloak slipping into the panel. Al lets us know that he's both angry at Chapel and hates Chapel. And then, Chapel shows up. Unfortunately, by the time Al makes his move, the other two members of Youngblood have joined Chapel. Al hopes Chapel's teammates know not to turn their backs on him. Chapel is training with Shaft and Die Hard in the Youngblood's equivalent to the X-Men's Danger Room, while complaining that the training is too easy. The new warrior droids Chapel ordered are about to attack, and he's hoping for more of a challenge. Shaft ends the training session. He has to get ready for a meeting. Chapel isn't finished yet. In fact, he's just getting warmed up. As Al gets closer, he can hear Chapel's laughter down the hallway. All he can think is, he's still as cocky as ever. Al, armed with his powers, is looking forward to whatever the next few hours bring. Al braces himself for the coming confrontation. One last reminder. Wanda. Then he steps inside and slams the doors behind him. Spawn stands silently, scanning across the O. It appears as though a word was left out on this page. I feel like an editor should read a comic before it goes to print to ensure mistakes like this don't happen. This is why it doesn't make sense to me to have the editor and letterer be the same person, in this case, Tom Orzechowski. And this is going to start a long list of what I'm going to call misspawnings. I like the detail that Spawn's cape and chains are flitting about as though ready to feast or just writhing in anticipation. When Al sees Chapel, his dead heart skips a beat. He doesn't want to fight all three of these men. He's only interested in Chapel and wants to use as little of his powers as possible. Shaft threatens Spawn, telling him to freeze or 20 agents will be sent in to stop him. Unexpectedly, Badrock crashes the party. Spawn made it past the heat sensors, but tripped at least one of the alarms, and Badrock is checking things out. Badrock sees Spawn and assumes he must be a member of Youngblood Academy and compliments his cape. Spawn makes his move, lifting his hands and begins shrinking and morphing in shape and size. This was a pre-calculated use of energy of which Spawn felt there was no other choice. After Spawn disappears, Badrock points out that Spawn took Chapel with him. Shaft sends Die Hard to scan the rest of the facility while he has Badrock look over the computer data for similar intruders. Oddly, for the second issue in a row, Todd takes a jab at Hanna-Barbera, having Shaft call Badrock by the wrong name and then having to be corrected. Badrock points out that Chapel has a personal guidance signal, which is a personal tracking device, on him which will allow Youngblood to locate Chapel within minutes. The rest of the Youngblood team is being called in. They want to show Spawn what happens when you mess with a Youngblood. We're back to the bedroom of Wanda and Terry. Last issue, we saw Terry Fitzgerald threatened by government goons sent to his house by Jason Wynn. The stress and worry this has put upon him is keeping Terry up at night. We learn that Terry works for United States Security Group, the USSG. After Al died, Terry needed a break from frontline activity and shifted over to the Intercultural Liaison Unit. Terry knows their security group doesn't get muscled by other government agents or agencies unless something very serious is on the line. Terry has no idea what it might be. Because of this turn of events, Terry needs to find some answers. If he doesn't, things could get ugly for him. He has to stay in front of this. Find, determine, formulate, solve. 4 of the 5 basic points of training. The fifth one he left out, is protect. Wanda catches him looking out the window and asks if anything is wrong. Terry doesn't know how to protect his wife and child against a threat in which there is no target. He can't say anything to Wanda until he has decided on his next course of action. In the meantime, Terry has to hide the fear he feels for his family's safety. Fortunately, Terry's job allows him to keep secrets. Wanda understands that. She wants to know what's wrong, but accepts Terry's answer when he says he can't talk about it yet. He leaves the room to check on Cyan. We switch over to Sam and Twitch at New York's 12th Precinct. Sam is at the end of a day of listening to complaints from concerned citizens. Twitch comes in at the end of a complaint to inform Sam that the board will be releasing their decision on their suspension tomorrow and that they could be back to work as soon as Thursday. Sam is happy to hear this and looking forward to following up on the guy wearing the red cape, their only lead into the death of Billy Kincaid. 8,000 miles away in Botswana, a necromantic mist begins to form. Out of it comes Chapel and Spawn, who need a moment to recover. Chapel wants to know where they are, while Spawn insists that Chapel should recognize the location. Chapel claims he doesn't notice the landscape while working. This cuts to the core of the problem. Chapel has never cared about anything other than himself, not even his friends. Al wants to know why. What was Chapel's motivation for killing him off? Did Chapel just do it for promotion? Maybe it was something as simple as Chapel didn't like Al's haircut or clothes. Or maybe Chapel didn't care just as long as he had a target. Chapel doesn't want to talk it out. If they are here to fight, stop talking and fight. Al had forgotten how arrogant Chapel is, but did he really? When he first heard Chapel's voice this issue, he was reminded of how cocky Chapel is. Al blames everything that has happened to him since his death on Chapel. The devil didn't make me. You did. Spawn tells Chapel his Youngblood tracking device is scrambled to ensure this is a private meeting. Before going into battle, Spawn removes his cape. Al's cape and chains were grabbed by Overkill during their battle, so it's nice to see Al thinking ahead. It reminds me of when Captain America spent time as Nomad. He started out with a cape, but he got rid of it after the cape hindered him in a fight against the Serpent Squad. The battle begins. Chapel makes a dive, but it's Al who lands a punch. Al is angry that Chapel took so much from him and didn't even think enough about it to remember it. Killing Al wasn't special. It was just another day at work. Al pulls off his hood and demands Chapel look at what he did. Al goes on about how upset he was to lose their awesome, patriotic broship. Bros aren't supposed to kill bros. Al's fatal mistake was trusting Chapel to follow bro law. And this is where I have to point out that Al, as we see him here, doesn't know the full story. For starters, we will later learn that it wasn't Chapel who killed Al. Secondly, it's kind of awkward to have Al complaining about getting killed by Chapel in the line of duty when we saw in Youngblood Strike File, Volume 1, Issues 1 through 3, Al previously assisted Chapel in killing a fellow agent, Duke, whom they had a history of working with. Most likely, Al does not remember doing this because he doesn't have access to all of his memories. It was only last issue he falsely remembers Chapel killing him, so it should be no surprise that Al doesn't recall his role in killing Duke, and Al might not ever remember that moment. Chapel stands up, ready to break Spawn's neck. Then Spawn lets on who he is. He calls Chapel by a special bro name, the Don Juan of Killers. And in that moment, Chapel realizes he is face to face with Al Simmons. We're given a look into Chapel's mind. His thoughts take him back just over 5 years. Jason Wynn gives Chapel a new assignment for Botswana. Once things heat up, he's supposed to terminate Al Simmons. Chapel and Simmons were friends, but Chapel was fed intelligence verifying that Simmons was a spy, the same thing that happened to them with Duke. Chapel never bothered to verify any of those details, and to be fair, why would he? After all, Chapel is a good soldier. He follows orders without questioning authority. Then we learn a little bit about what makes Chapel tick. His pride in getting the job done is stronger than any relationship he's involved in. This extends to friends and women. An example of Chapel being happy to follow orders and not asking many questions is when he agrees to take injections as part of the Super Soldier program, while Al Simmons refuses to join the same program. Another example is when Chapel transfers over to being the leader of Bloodstrike. Even though he's not the best leadership material, and even though he doesn't want the position, Chapel comes in and tries his best to do a good job. Chapel shared a couple of drinks with Al before the mission, and when the time came to complete the assignment, Chapel supposedly casually walks up and shoots Al Simmons in the face. As part of the flashback, we are given a news report from 1987. First, we're shown CNN reporting on Lieutenant Colonel Al Simmons' death while defending his nation in the U.S.-Botswana conflict. Both the president and vice president attend Al's funeral, showing that he was well known and respected at the time of his death. My view on 2 is complaining that Al is getting all of the attention while ignoring the other 42 U.S. soldiers who died the same day in the same conflict. Good point, but to be fair, how many of those other soldiers saved the president from an assassination attempt and then got voted one of the 10 sexiest men alive? The underlying conspiracy being pushed here is that the president is using Al's death to give him a boost in the polls. Entertainment News mentions Al's sexiest man notoriety when sharing the news of his death. Most telling is how the report wraps up. The official government story given to the press is pure propaganda and fictionalizes the events around Al's death to make it appear as though he died a hero while saving lives under enemy fire. Back to the present, where Al and Chapel are in the middle of a fist fight. Chapel thinks Al isn't real and that Geiger is messing with his head. We saw a little bit of Geiger in Youngblood Strike File number 1 and 2. Impressively, Chapel has taken Spawn to the ground. Most people would not be capable of doing this, but Chapel is stronger than most men due to his super soldier shots. Even then, he's not strong enough to hold Spawn down. Spawn rises up. Chapel shows zero remorse about killing Al. Maybe he's just putting up emotional barriers, but he appears to take pride in it. After all, he hated the way Al whined and always tried to fix things. Simmons was too straight-laced. As Chapel stabs Spawn in the chest, he tells his one-time friend that the government poisoned the super soldier serum with HIV. It's hard to get this panel to line up with the timeline of events laid out in Youngblood Strike File number 3, where Chapel is removed from Youngblood because of his HIV status without his knowledge. Chapel finds out later that day after threatening to kill Wynn inside of Wynn's office. But based off what takes place here, this means that Chapel must have known about his HIV positive status and its origins before the Youngblood team did. Spawn tells Chapel he's pitiful. Al never took the serum because he and Wanda were trying to have a baby and he was worried about side effects on their children. Spawn pulls the metal out of his chest and tells Chapel he's back with more than enough power to kill him. Yeah, you have to admire Chapel's resilience. He is still willing to fight, still thinks he might get the upper hand. Spawn tells Chapel if he wanted him dead, he would have already killed him. How true. Spawn has other plans for Chapel. The death of Al Simmons caused sadness to a lot of people. But who would care if Chapel died? Nobody. Al was the only thing close to a friend Chapel ever had. Or as Spawn puts it, all you'll ever have is a bunch of whores who don't give a damn about you. Spawn is going to fix that. Spawn is going to even the score for losing everything he loved. He reaches one hand down onto Chapel's head and uses his necro powers. We see Chapel scream in a wisp of smoke. Afterwards, Spawn returns Chapel's Youngblood tracking device, now in working order. Spawn lets Chapel know that the two of them aren't finished, in hopes that Chapel decides to keep things personal, meaning, don't drag Youngblood into this. Youngblood arrives in Botswana to pick Chapel up 8 hours later. As soon as they see Chapel, they can tell that he's injured and call for the first aid kit. His teammates are curious as to what Spawn wanted. Chapel replies, nothing, while he dangles a necklace with a Hellspawn medallion. Oh, and his face. Chapel has always been known for using makeup to make his face appear like a skull when out on missions. Al made that look permanent via a mixture of removing some skin, changing some skin pigment color, and giving Chapel a mouth of pointy teeth. But to be fair, sometimes Chapel was drawn with pointy teeth before this happened, and sometimes this is represented as Spawn leaving Chapel's skull exposed, and other times it looks more like a permanent makeup job. Thus ends year 1 of Spawn and begins year 2, and what an ending. So many characters were in this issue, and were given a showdown that had been promised since before Spawn went to print. To top it off, we are teased that Violator will return next issue. The drama between Al and Chapel could have been drawn out longer, but needed to be addressed as it was common knowledge outside of the comic who killed Spawn. In fact, this was a selling point for Image Comics before either Spawn or Youngblood went to press. Everybody knew that Chapel, a Youngblood team member who was owned by a different creator, had killed Spawn. Again, Liefeld and McFarlane were trying very hard to make a shared Image universe during this time. We'll eventually revisit Al's death and what actually took place that day, but that's for a future episode. If you like this series, please help the channel out by giving the video a thumbs up. Click subscribe to make those new videos easier to find. Cosmic Comics, I'm out.